Hello, Deborah. Thank you for coming on the podcast today. I'm excited to talk to you.
Thanks, Shane, for having me.
It's a pleasure. Since you and I got introduced a few weeks ago, I've really looked into a lot of the work that you're doing, and I admire it greatly. And for those who don't know, a lot of your work is around gratitude and mindfulness and the integration of those two areas, and specifically, how it impacts a person's life in terms of what a continuous practice of gratitude can do for you and how it can transform the way you feel about yourself, about things that are happening in the world, and just your overall mental state of being. And it's such a powerful tool, right, that's often very underutilized and not very well understood, we could say. I mean, how did you get into this field? Like, what led you to become a gratitude coach?
Well, I'm not like a credentialed therapist or anything like that. I developed this process because it helped me get over depression. And that's pretty important in my understanding of things, that this approach or this perspective really can have a lot of impact on your life. I'll give you a little backstory. When I was young, I suffered from some level of trauma during my childhood. And I came through childhood with two basic beliefs. One was that I wasn't worth much, and the other was that nobody would ever listen to me. So these beliefs, they might not have been true, but that's what it seemed like how the world operated when I was young. So this really informed how I became an adult. So I had low self-esteem. I was prone to depression. I didn't really explore my artistic inclinations thoroughly. I expected to be disappointed in jobs, romance, and different things. And I was really at a low point when I was in my early 50s. I moved from Chicago, where I live, to another city to try to jumpstart my career. And that didn't work.
Yeah.
I was still working temp jobs no matter where I was. So when I came back to Chicago, because I knew more people here, and then I shortly was involved in a car accident. I couldn't walk for a couple months. Wow. Things really were terrible for me. I was like at a low point. And I think this is pretty common for people, that we don't make change until we're forced to.
Yeah.
So I was as low as I think you could get. And I decided to try to spend a little time every day thinking about some positives. Mm-hmm. That would be at least time that I wasn't spending thinking about obsessing over something that wasn't working. So that was helpful, but I decided to make that into a journal, into a blog, where I would open up what I was doing to...
Sure. Don't worry about it.
Should I wait?
No.
Okay.
It's all good.
Where I would open up I would write reflections on small things that uplifted me, made me feel good. And I would write those things down, and I would put them in my blog. And they could be everyday things, like how my ice maker makes ice, or the difference between lemons and limes. I just wrote about little things that really, if you give them attention, they could be special. They could have wonderful things to offer. Yeah. And I noticed that my mood started going up. So part of my discovery, of course, was I was a writer who wasn't writing. Mm-hmm. And just having something to write about elevated my mood somewhat. But then the act of positively and by intention, focusing on things that I could really appreciate, continue to elevate my mood. And the fact that once I knew what seemed to work for me, I started looking for those things everywhere. As I would look for things to write about, and then I actually looked for the specific things that I knew lifted my mood and outlook. And that made a huge difference.
That's amazing. And I think that, what I take from that story that you just told is that it's so true how where we focus our attention, it shapes how we perceive reality, right? And we can't always control all of the thoughts that appear in our heads and the moods and the sort of, feeling states that come up, but we certainly can do something about, adding to it. And whether it's something like writing or reading or just doing something you enjoy, the more you sort of practice that, the more you start to see it in the rest of your life, right? And so it's that whole developing of that sort of framework, right?
I think that's a very important point, and it's especially important now since we've all been introduced to COVID, since there's so many things in our world that are challenging or difficult. It doesn't mean that we ignore or deny or dismiss the challenges or feeling sad or feeling angry, the things that come up that we can't control, but we can control how we feel, how we experience life, what we want to put our focus on. And while we're still figuring our way out of political messes and other challenges, we could still enjoy some things in our life, and giving some attention to things we can derive pleasure or that add meaning to our lives puts us in a better position to survive difficult times and puts us in a much better position to enhance the pleasure that we might be getting from something.
Yeah, absolutely. And, needless to say, I think that it's is there ever really good political times? The world's often just a shit show of chaos and all sorts of transformation. And that just seems to be the nature of things, right? Wherever you are. The specific details might be different, and it's certainly worse in some places than in others. But there's all kinds of chaos going on all the time. And you can't control most of it because, as much as we would like to have the infinite power that we think we do to sort of change the world, it's yeah, to some degree you do, but also it's more important, at least I think, to focus on your experience of life, right? And if that's being if everything in the world is just the focus of your attention, then that's just how you're going to feel. And so your whole life's going to feel just like the world is a misery. But as you say, there are plenty of things that are around that if you look at them and you choose to focus your attention on some of the beauty or some of the fun or the pleasure or the joy in various things, even small things, it can make a huge difference to just how you feel. And then that's really the start of how big change happens anyway, right? Not that should be your ultimate goal, but that's kind of how I think big change happens is when people at the sort of ground level all start changing and being and feeling better, right?
I think that's very true. I would say I call my approach to gratitude intentional gratitude. So I think the intention of finding things to appreciate is very empowering.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that I could go into any situation and it might not work out exactly the way I want it to, but I could usually find something that I could appreciate in that situation. And that gives me a lot of confidence that I could go into something, that I could face the world and find something of value that I could build on,
Yeah.
which is really empowering and a bit of a relief that you're not totally you're not a victim. You're not at the whims of the world. How you feel or how you experience life is up to you.
Yeah. And that's huge power in that, right? Because, and it does take a little bit of practice and life experience. It's one thing to sort of know conceptually that that's how it is, but once you start doing it, you start to see the sort of the power in it of being able to have control over how you feel about things, at least to some degree. It doesn't have to be 100% all the time, because things do happen to you and you often just have all sorts of reactions to it, but it's then immediately, what do you do from there, right? And it's also not a denial of the sort of negative facets of life and the sort of negative things that happen to you. People die, people get sick, you get sick, whatever happens, like those things do suck. And it's not that, this practice is to say that don't think about those things or try to find the good parts of it. It's like, no, but at the same time as processing, through your grief or through your sadness or your anger, it's like that's one part of it and it's important and you shouldn't suppress that or shut it down or do any of those kind of things, because that's going to make it a lot worse for you. But it's also finding what is good in the situation, if you can. And if you can't, wait a little bit and then you will, right? Like time passes and things start to open up again for you.
Something I like to explain to people that I believe my approach to gratitude is very different than an approach that most people are familiar with, where they keep a list journal and they end the day writing 10 or 15 things that they were happy with. So that's a good way to maybe create a little positive consciousness, to scan your memory for something good that happened to you. But it really takes away your power. It means you're just responding to external events or other circumstances that you go through. It's wonderful to get a parking spot close to where your destination is. I know many people believe they practice gratitude because they're so thankful when they get parking spots close by.
Yeah.
And I go, well, that's not really tapping into gratitude in the deepest way you can. So, or other people are happy to get a phone call from somebody they're thinking about. So all those things are good, but they're all dependent on things outside of your control. And I think there's something just so incredibly wonderful about knowing yourself so well that you could actually know what lifts you up. And then where the practice comes in is practicing knowing what those things are and then seeing them in the world that is presented to you.
Right. So let's dive deeper a little bit into that. What do you mean by knowing yourself so well? And what's this difference between this deep gratitude and the sort of superficial parking spot gratitude? Like, how do you cash out that difference?
Well, I believe gratitude is very personal. For you to really feel something, for you to be transformed by it, you can't just assume to be grateful for whatever your priest or Sunday school teacher or parents told you. You have to really feel something. I remember, I'm much older than you. Back in my day when I was a child, my parents would feed me something and maybe I wouldn't want it. And they'd say, but kids are starving in such and such a country. And I go, that doesn't make me grateful, or it doesn't make me want to eat this.
Yeah.
It just makes me feel sad for these other kids.
It's like a guilt
So
trip.
it's like people might tell you what you should be grateful for, like you should be grateful for having a job, no matter what it is. because some people don't have it. So I believe gratitude really has to be personal, something that genuinely uplifts you. I also believe gratitude is not a comparison. It's not really uplifting to think of gratitude as something you have that you should be grateful for because somebody else doesn't have it. Or because you didn't have it last week.
Yeah.
That doesn't really well me up with wonderful feelings. So starting with the understanding that feeling grateful is a kind of a way to celebrate yourself.
Right.
It's like really celebrating what matters to you, what you value. So I think that's really empowering and wonderful because there are so few natural circumstances where you think about what your preferences are and what you care about really matters. But it really matters when it comes to where you announce or claim feeling grateful or appreciative. The other thing I recommend, or I have a whole system for developing your personal gratitude themes. So I believe everybody has their own personal gratitude themes. And I came up with this idea because I discovered I had them. So I assume everybody has them.
Yeah.
So when I was writing my blog, which is called nosmallthing.net, at first I was just, writing things, little stories about little reflections about what lifted my mood. But then I read them for about 2 years. I read 2 years worth of them, and I realized I tended to write about a handful of themes. And once I knew what those themes were, it was easier to find them in whatever was happening in the world. And that helped me reconnect with good feelings. I'll give you an example. One of my personal themes is belonging. I feel really grateful for any experience where I feel I either belong to a group of people, maybe we're all fans for the same sports team, or I feel like I belong to like lovers of poetry or to mankind or to my family or whatever. But feeling that I belong to something bigger than myself really fills me with good feelings. And I remember being at a grocery store and I was really upset, really unhappy because I was waiting in line. And I was very irritated and very impatient. And I started looking around at other people also waiting in line. And I said, they're in the same situation I'm in. They're also like waiting when they don't want to. And we just looked at each other and we smiled and started laughing. The feeling of being in the same situation as other people in a very simple, everyday kind of scenario really lifted my mood. When I knew that I'm in a situation I didn't like, I might ask myself, are any of my gratitude themes showing up here? So knowing that I really care about belonging, that really affects me, I could see, well, is it showing up here? And that helps me reconnect with good feelings.
So on the topic of like these themes, right? Is it that like, let's just use your example of the belonging, right? So there's an interesting like dichotomy between like when the belonging feelings aren't there, you feel bad, which you don't like. Obviously you don't like, because bad feelings no one likes. I mean, they suck. But then there's the other side of it, which is like the feeling good when you are belonging to something, right? And so the gratitude seems to come in part from and this is what I'm taking like from your theme analysis, is that you find these areas in your life that are of great importance to you. And it could be for any number of reasons. And they're probably very different for very different people, although there's probably a lot of similarity I'm sure belonging, for example, is probably one of most people's main themes because, we're social creatures and we've evolved to belong in groups, and when we don't, it's bad. And, historically, like if you were kicked out of your tribe or your crew or whatever it was, like you would die. And so it's essential to our survival, at least it used to be, to belong, right? And so it makes sense why that need is so powerful for so many people. But it's also that, so the one aspect of it is like not wanting the bad feelings of not belonging. And then the other aspect of it is wanting the good feelings of belonging, right? And so it's this interesting polarity of like being able to just understand within yourself, like what are these areas that, press your buttons the most, so to speak.
I have like a system, some suggestions for figuring out what your gratitude themes are.
Yeah.
But I also want to address this question about being happy when the presence of a theme is apparent and being unhappy when it's not apparent. I never go there.
Okay.
And it's not because I don't think about something missing. I don't think about one of my themes is missing because I have more than one theme.
Right.
So if I'm like, in the moment, I recommend to people to practice being in the moment at least a few times a day by intention, which is basically just to stop and think about how they feel and what they notice about how they feel, what they think about how they feel. And don't make any judgments, but practice noticing that, because what I think a person wants to do is get in the habit of building on things that are positive and moving on or continuing to look for things that they might not build on, but other things that might be positive that they could build on. So practicing being in the moment is a great experience, a great way to experience this. But I will stop periodically during the day and say, are any of my gratitude themes here? So I don't worry about if one is there and feel sad if it's not there. I just think that it's a chance for any one of my gratitude themes to show up. So chances are there is something that might be I could appreciate in the moment. So some of my other themes are beauty or humor or doing something new. And I say doing something new is something I'm grateful for, even if the experience is not ultimately wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm grateful for the experience because it tells me what I like to do more and more or less of. So I'm still grateful for the experience. So I have I call it my grateful dozen. I have about 12 themes that I am conscious of. And people don't have the same themes, but if I stop periodically, I might just spontaneously notice something I really can appreciate in the moment. But at other times, when I stop to be in the moment and nothing comes to me, I will ask myself the question, are any of my gratitude themes showing up here? And more often, because I have a few themes, I can connect with something that can uplift me. And then I feel really good about myself because I was able to direct my own mind, my own attention to focus on positives, which also is a positive.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, it's a good system. I mean, I like the idea of the themes and having multiple because you can use it in any situation to be like, well, what might I be grateful for here if it's not immediately obvious, right, in the present moment? And that's tremendously helpful, especially from a, conscious perspective of knowing, like, these are the things that make me feel good and make me feel grateful, right? And so I can look for them, and that helps, right?
Right. And you really don't try to figure out what your themes are when you're having the experience. It's good to understand what those themes are ahead of time. And as you have more experiences, you might add a theme to your list. That's perfectly okay. But either by looking at what you know about yourself, what you tend to look forward to, or looking at some of your favorite memories, and really dig deep to understand the essence of why you feel good in that situation. Not just give it a quick answer, but really come to the underlying reason why this situation makes you feel good. Knowing some of those things really in advance allows you, when you're in a situation, to know things that might uplift you and how to look for those qualities in the present moment.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually had a recent experience with this as well, where that sort of internal reflection, and for me it was like I was trying to think of some things, like, why do I like hanging out with people? And it sort of came up because, as you mentioned, with COVID and all these new ways of the world, it's like we've also become very adjusted to a new way of being. As humans do, you just adapt to whatever's happening. But for the last sort of 2 years or whatever it is, it's almost like social contact has been heavily minimized, if not gone altogether, for the most part. Maybe not entirely, but certainly to a large degree. And even though you can do phone calls and Zoom calls and things like that, it's not really the same as being in the same presence as another person, right? Someone that you love or care about or whatever it is. And so, it was like the other day I went out with a friend of mine, and we just had like a really good time. And it was the first time that I'd done that in a long time. And I had to sort of think about it and say, well, why haven't I been doing this? I know I like hanging out with people and spending time. And I haven't been doing it, and I could use COVID as an excuse, but really what had happened was I had just become so used to not doing it. And I guess COVID's the reason for that, but I become so used to not doing it that it just is easier to stay in that zone, right, of just what's become the new normal comfort zone. But as soon as I sort of stepped out and I was like, I just feel like doing something good and different, it, just like reawoken, so to speak, this, feeling, I guess. And from there, I took a step back and I was like, okay, well, why do I like hanging out with people, right? And I think that, just to connect it back to what you were saying, it's like, well, what was really good about it? And, was it the company? Was it the conversation? Was it the outing out of the home or whatever it is? And all of those things are important, but really it was just that social contact with someone who you know and who you care about, and you can just be and discuss and have fun, right? And so I was really grateful for that, and I'm sort of using that as a sort of tool now to sort of kickstart me to do it more often, right?
There's two things that I want to comment on from what you shared. One is that once you know what once you catch yourself feeling really drawn to something, to ask yourself why, or what is underlying that good feeling. And you understood that having some social contact, maybe getting some new ideas, or sharing an experience with somebody, was really at the core of what made you feel good. So there's two purposes for this. One is to find other things you could do that would give you the same feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you know you love sharing, even though you might not share like physical space with somebody, you could share musical playlists or recommend a book to somebody or a podcast to somebody.
Yeah.
Once you know that the core of what made you feel good is the sharing aspect, you could actually put yourself in more situations to do that. And you could also find, identify ways in different situations that where you are sharing. You might not think you're sharing like
Yeah.
things and experience with somebody, like you're at the movie theater with a lot of people that you don't know. And you might say, God, this was wonderful. Well, it might be wonderful because you like the actor or because you haven't been out in months.
Yeah.
There could be lots of reasons, but maybe you just love knowing that you're having the same experience that somebody else is having.
Yeah.
And when you know the core of what it is that makes you feel good, you could actually find different things, that different actual exact experiences that have the same quality or give
Right.
you the same feeling. And once you know about yourself, what your themes are, what really floats your boat, it's much easier to find things to be happy about.
Yeah, and it really is about finding that essence, right? It's not about the activity itself or the situation itself. It's why in that situation, like what gets you going, and then as you say, figure out a way to do it in all sorts of other situations that are different but similar in that like sharing context. Like I think that's a wonderful example because sharing is something that lots of people love to do, and we often don't do it for all sorts of reasons, even though we'd want to. But it can be as simple as just like sending people a funny picture, sharing memes with your friends, or sharing a poem, or sharing a good TV series. I mean, I have that impulse too. Whenever I watch something cool on TV or read something cool, I just have this like desire. I'm like, oh, I just want to tell everyone about it, right? And I guess that's part of the reason why I have a podcast. But I guess you could say at least I'm figuring it out in that sense, right? And it's great because it's so great every time. I mean, I love doing this podcast. It's the best thing that I've done in a long time. And even if it was just for me, it would be great. And the fact that I get to share it with people is even better, right? It ticks many of the boxes. But yeah, it comes out in many different forms. But I guess it does take a lot of self-insight and a willingness to really look at yourself, because when you do that, you can also find the negative sides, which I think turns people off as well, because you also find out what you really don't like, and then thinking about that stuff isn't always fun. I don't know if fun's the operative word, but it's not great to start thinking about that. But as you said, what it actually does is it shows you even more clearly what you do want, right?
Right.
And it's all about that focusing in, so to speak, of figuring out what works for you in life and what doesn't, and trying to do more of what works for you, because what else is there to do? I mean, what's the point of anything if you're not going to try and at least get some joy and good experience from your life? Like, everything else doesn't matter that much,
I think mindfulness is a great and often underused faculty to develop. People think about mindfulness as like conscious breathing,
Mm-hmm.
but there's other aspects to it.
Sure.
It's like knowing how you think and feel so that you could make decisions that are more likely to make you happier.
Mm-hmm.
I think mindfulness is a huge thing. I also want to commend you on looking at things a little bit deeper, because a lot of people just want to feel good. They don't want to do the work. But the problem is, I believe, when people just want to be happy or be on a high, they really are also afraid of losing that, afraid of losing that kind of high. And if they're not conscious, they don't know how to get back there. So in some ways, I think practicing intentional gratitude is like the key to happiness, because rather than trying to pursue happiness, which either you're afraid of losing or you don't often know that you're there till after it's over.
Yeah.
Knowing how to get back into a state where you feel empowered and in control of how your mood is like something you could always do. So even if you're not in this wonderful state, you could get back into that state. So I think that knowing how to bring yourself back to a state of contentment, let's say, is as good as it gets.
Yeah, because then you don't have to worry about much, right? Because you know that no matter what happens, you can control how you feel about yourself, at least in the situation.
Yes, I think that's true. And I also wanted to comment on the other thing you were talking about, how you started asking yourself questions about your experience, to understand what it is about this experience exactly that gives you positive feelings. I often, when I do a workshop, I often use the analogy of loving your pet, loving your dog. So many people love their dogs, but they have different reasons why. Like some people like their dogs because they have a shared history with them. Some people like having their dogs because their dogs give them permission to be spontaneous and play. And other people love their dogs because of physical closeness. I know I live alone, and sometimes it's so wonderful to stroke my dog's belly because it's like my little fix of physical closeness. It's important. Each person has their own gratitude themes, their own different reasons that they're grateful. They're the essence of why they're grateful. So their triggers might be the same. Many people like having a dog or a pet, but really understanding what it is about having a pet really gives them a lot more understanding that they could use in other situations and know how to bring up their own mood.
Yeah, it's true. And I've said this before. My dogs are my Zen masters. That's what I call them, because they're just the best. And I can spend hours of every day just sitting with them, and there's nothing else to do. I mean, and that's, perfect for me, because it's the best. And, there's no expectations. They're just little bundles of joy. And, they know how to be mindful better than any human that I've met before. And it's great. And you can just sit there and be in their presence and, be there with them. I mean, you don't have to. You can be on your phone or on your computer or something like that. And it's still better than not having the dog there. But it's not the same. And it's true. It is true what you're saying. It's like, well, people will like their dogs for different reasons. And some people will like the responsibility, the feeling of responsibility, and knowing that, that dog looks to you to take care of all of its needs. And that's a wonderful thing. It's not a bad thing at all. I mean, as long as you're doing it. But other people just want the company. Other people want the love. Other people want it's just, there's so many different things. And it would be very easy to just say, oh, I love my dogs, and that's the end of that. And I suppose that's the first step, right, in all of this, is it's like, well, the first step in figuring out your themes, let's say, is to start off by just saying, okay, well, what makes me feel good? What am I grateful for? And it will start off pretty general, right? Because if you haven't looked deep, then you can't just know shit. I mean, you got to start off somewhere, and that's okay. And you start off, you're like, oh, I love spending time with my dogs. Well, and then you can go, well, why? And then the why question, you can sort of keep going, and ultimately you end up with sort of one theme, which is just because it makes me feel good or whatever it is. And then that's a good basis to start a theme. Is that sort of your process of helping people figure it out?
That's pretty much my process, but there's two things to add to it.
Okay.
One is that a theme is like one or two or three or just a handful of words. It's not a big explanation. It's just a few words that captures the essence of why this thing gives you this feeling. The other thing is that themes have to be able, you have to be able to apply these themes broadly. So if you think something is a theme for you, like you love to share, or you love to be in the moment, or you love to feel that you're an expert, a mastery, I call it mastery. Like some people are really grateful for the feeling of knowing how something works, being an expert at something. So if you boil this down into one or two or three words that captures the essence of this thing, take it one step further to make sure this idea can be applied to other situations. Because if you could only go back to the original thing that triggered your thought or your ideas about what could be a theme, you could be stuck there. I use sometimes the analogy, let's say one of your favorite memories was eating chocolate ice cream.
Right.
When you were a kid on the pier. Well, you'd be very limited if you had to have chocolate ice cream.
Yeah, on a pier.
In every situation.
Yeah.
It's not a bad thing. You'd be very limited if you had to have chocolate ice cream in order to feel good. But if you realize that, eating chocolate ice cream on the pier in Door County when I was 12 years old really is a wonderful memory for me. If you understood that it also conveyed the feeling of getting a little treat, giving yourself a treat, or feeling like a kid, you could actually apply those things to other situations. So you could realize that maybe you're observing, like you're walking through a park and you observe some people tossing frisbee, and you jump in and you toss the frisbee around too. So there was something about like feeling like a kid, like playing in the moment,
Right,
that you could relate to. Or maybe it's something about like something else you eat, that, or taking a bubble bath, or taking the afternoon off from work. Maybe what really appeals to you is feeling that you're giving yourself a treat, that you're taking care of yourself. Whatever it is for you, make sure you could apply that idea to circumstances outside of the thing that triggered you, because that will ensure that you could use that idea for a theme in a new situation that comes to you. You might ask yourself, are any of my themes showing up here? And maybe one does, maybe none do, but maybe 4 or 5 do. And it's really wonderful to know that whatever what you have ideas for in terms of qualities that uplift you are already like vetted a little bit. You already know they could show up elsewhere.
And then you start looking for them, right?
Yes.
And that's where the mindfulness piece comes in as well, because if you're not too busy thinking about other stuff, then you have the conscious space to just observe and see what you might find, right?
Right. I wouldn't like walk around thinking about my themes all the time, but periodically I would stop myself in the moment and ask myself if I'm enjoying this situation, or if not, is there anything in this situation that I could appreciate? And as long as you know what your themes or tendencies or qualities that you've responded to in the past, you have a much better chance of finding something to be pleased with in the current situation.
Yeah, and also maybe even what can I do to enjoy the situation, right?
Right.
You can take an active role in it too. I mean, maybe not always, but certainly sometimes. And you can also take active roles to remove yourself from displeasing situations. You know, you don't have to always just sit and suffer. You can do something about it, right?
Definitely. I think knowing what you really, it's not only pleasure, it could be things that add value or affirm your values. It could be lots of things that really make you feel good. But knowing what those things are, you have a much better ability to do more of what you like and less of what you don't like.
Yeah. And what else are you doing with the time that you have? I mean, I keep saying that, but it's like, what's the point of doing other shit if your whole life is spent not trying to feel like you're living well to some degree? Yeah, it's just to me that doesn't make a lot of sense. Maybe it does to some people, and they can go off and do their thing, and I bless them and good luck to them, and maybe they probably won't be listening to this episode. But for those who are here, it's like something will have resonated within them to say that this makes sense, and I want to do this. And so how do you sort of approach, let's say, someone who hasn't done it before, in terms of just starting out, right? Like, do you say sit for 5 minutes and just write some stuff down, or what's the sort of first step?
So that's a good question. I would recommend some low-hanging fruit, like people tend to know some things about themselves.
Yeah.
Like, I know that winning or getting something for free always delights me. Like I would collect at the grocery store when they would have little contests. If you collect receipts, you'll win, cash them in and get a free pot and pan. I go, I don't need a pot and pan.
Yeah.
And then more pots and pans. But the idea of getting something for free delights me.
Yeah.
Or getting an upgrade on an airplane. Maybe you paid full price for a ticket and they go, oh, they overbooked. So would you like to sit up there? Well, of course.
Yeah.
You get an upgrade. So those little bonuses delight me. So I know some things about myself, and I think most people know some things about themselves. And they would follow the same process you discussed, to look at those things and try to get into the essence of what it is that delights them.
Mm-hmm.
And or affirms what they feel about life, what they think is very important to their character. So I think that's one way to develop your own themes, and that's probably the most immediate and easiest to start out with. The other two things I recommend, and I do this, I lead people through exercises, and this when I do my workshop. I take people through a guided meditation, and I recommend taking a peak experience, which is like a memory that has stuck in your mind. So it's funny, I'm from Chicago, but one of my favorite vacations of all time was driving through the Canadian Rockies. I'm sure you've probably been there. So I flew into Calgary and drove up to like Banff and Lake Louise and Jasper. It was just beautiful. And I had no company with me, but I just looked out at the windshield and saw like this incredible scenery changing all the time. And this was a peak experience for me, a memory that I would love to keep forever. Like, it had a profound effect on me. So if you look at those special memories and then isolate some things you cared about from those special memories, like why they are still in your mind, you would also get clues on where else to keep digging around.
Right.
So those are a few things I like to do. I also recommend looking at your photographs, whether it's on your cell phone or the old-fashioned kind printed.
Yeah.
When you look at images, you might be drawn to something unconsciously. And then you go through a process of becoming more conscious about it. And it's like dream interpretation or dream work, to identify that there's something here that I feel something about, but I don't know what it is yet. And keep asking yourself questions till you think about some things that image suggests to you. And I think that could also be another powerful way to...
Lots of people are trying to contact you today.
Apparently, or tell me something.
Yeah, a lot of people want some gratitude in their lives. No, it's good. I think those are really helpful strategies, and they make sense, and they're easy. And I would imagine that everyone has memories of good things. You just need to be willing to think about them for a little bit. I mean, it's a very interesting question why your mind stores some things and not others, and how photos and things like that will activate more memories and more thoughts about things. And so if you can't just willfully bring up stuff that is good, there's lots of other options. And I think that's a great way to start off, and it makes sense, and it's easy, and it's also a fun and enjoyable process, right? Because you're focusing on good things and you're trying to elicit good feelings. It's not a process of going through the rough stuff to get to the good stuff.
It's important to think of this as fun.
Yeah.
Because even though there's practice involved, and practice gets a bad rap.
Yeah.
People think it's mundane or what, it's boring or whatever. But there's something about having discipline to do something often, by intention, on a repeat basis, because doing that, they will uncover things that could become habitual, like something that has to be practiced by telling yourself, oh, it's 4:00, time to do such and such. After a while, it becomes like natural for you. So it might be work at first to look at what's happening and say, I'm going to stop and think about what I really like in this situation. And it might be work a little bit at the beginning, but after a while, especially if you see how you can use this information to bring up your own mood, it becomes something you want to do, and you start doing it unconsciously.
Yeah, it just automatically starts happening. And there's no better thing that you could do that could start happening automatically to you, is just to start feeling better and seeing the good things that are happening all around, right?
Right.
Yeah, no, it's tremendous. And it's true. Like a lot of things when you're building habits, they start off with effort and willpower. And especially if it's disruptive to your ordinary routine, it even feels more so. But this kind of a practice, although it requires effort, it's very immediately rewarding. It's not the kind of effort that is going to make you feel bad, right? Like if you're working out, let's say, just as a comparison, exercise, that requires a lot of effort, and it doesn't always feel good to do it, right? Because isn't always immediate benefit from it, and you're rarely investing long term. I mean, some people love it and, good for them and they're lucky to be in that position. But they've probably also cultivated the habit eventually and started seeing the benefit. And then you start to love it more and more because you've seen the whole picture. Whereas just starting out, it's often just like, why am I torturing myself? But not with this, because you get that immediate gratitude. I mean, you get that immediate mood boost from finding good things and things that make you feel good, right? Like that's a reward in and of itself.
It's wonderful to actually think about sharing good news with somebody.
Yeah.
A friend or acquaintance or somebody in a club with you, because people tend to share what's going wrong or share bad things.
Yeah.
And it's like the saying, misery loves company, but people love people who feel good, who have good news. So it's like, it's okay, it's good to have people, friends to confide in, to share how you might feel discouraged or angry or something. But at least make a point to share good things at least as much of the time. So I don't do this too much now, but I've been thinking about doing this to have more of a mechanism to actually share, for people to share little things that they're grateful about.
Yeah.
Because if people hear that kind of information from other people, they'll start thinking, oh, I'm grateful for that too.
Yeah.
Or it's wonderful. Or they get in a better mode because they know somebody is providing an example for them about how to focus their attention.
Right. And you can share in that experience with people, right?
Right.
And that's great too. And I mean, if you're telling good news to people and they're reacting badly, then maybe those aren't your people. But that's another topic.
I'll send them to you next time I hear from somebody that wants to complain. I go talk to my friend Shane.
I'll be like, I'll let you know what's up. Stop complaining. Who you helping? You're just making the world more miserable. No, it's good. And, I think most people have some people that they can do that with. And those are the best kind of people, is the ones who will celebrate with you and not necessarily be jealous of you or be judgmental of you and try to, downsize what you've brought. They'll just say, that's amazing and I want to share the joy with you because it's wonderful and it brings more happiness around, right? And that what could be better when spending time with people? Although there is a sense of it does feel good to complain with other people as well. As you say, misery loves company. It's a strange facet of human behavior, and it's been around for a long time, I think. But nevertheless, at least if you just add some good stuff in as well, it might balance it out a little bit. But anyway, listen, Deborah, I think this has been a tremendous conversation. It's been super interesting and uplifting, and I hope it really inspires some people. And go start writing your gratitudes and find your themes and start enjoying a lot more in life. And read Deborah's blog. It's called No Small Thing, and it's at nosmallthing.net. You've got some books as well and courses, and please feel free to promote all of your stuff before we finish up.
Well, on the website, I have my blog, and I've been keeping the blog since 2010. So I've been writing, posting almost every week for over 10 years.
Wow.
So there's a lot of old stuff you could uncover. I also have information on the website about my books, how you buy them. They're self-published, so they're only available from online retailers, but they're very available. There's also information about my courses. Also, I do have a Linktree site, a landing page, and my handle is Grateful Deb.
Nice.
So you could get a snapshot of what I'm up to, like other articles or my courses or whatever, by probably a link to this podcast.
Sure. Yeah, no, carry on.
No, so there's different things on the landing page that you could keep in touch with. And my email is Deborah@nosmallthing.net. If you have any thought, feel free to contact me. I'm also, I'm not sure when this episode will be airing, but I have in November 25th in the US, we have Thanksgiving. And I have a special campaign for the month. People can connect on either Facebook or Instagram and get a contemplation for the day, like some everyday thing. It might be, thank you for my breath, or thanks for running water. And I want to encourage people to actually contemplate how they are personally thankful for this thing. Mm-hmm. To the extent that you could make gratitude personal by taking a contemplation and thinking, I really am thankful for or because ... To whatever extent people can really personalize what they're grateful for, they can feel more power in it.
Yeah, fabulous. And all those links and everything will be also in the description for anyone who wants to check it out. And I encourage it. It's a wonderful blog and series and books. And so thank you again. I look forward to speaking with you again in the future. And yeah, until next time.
Thank you, Shane. Thank you.
Take care.